This is how the story goes, or is it? Let me tell you a tale of people you know, some you've never heard about, or people whose story you thought you knew. Everyone has a story. This is episode number 12. You gotta believe. Frank's career as a baseball pitcher began back in 1965, but almost didn't make it out of the bullpen. He spent a year in the minor league with the Jacksonville Suns. At 22, he was impressing girls more than fans, especially one particular girl, a high school student named Betty D'Agostino. Eventually, Frank was drafted to the New York Mets, where he began as a relief pitcher, but quickly worked up to playing in the starting rotation. It was the Vietnam era, so after what turned out to be a disappointing first season, Frank joined the Marine Corps Reserves. In 1969, he returned to baseball. This was the year the New York Mets soared out of their pitiful rankings to win 39 of their 50 regular games and play in the National League Championship Series. An arm injury gave everyone cause to think it would be the end of Frank's baseball career, but he persevered. The Mets sent him back to one of their minor league clubs where he became a relief pitcher all over again. It was there he acquired and perfected a pitch that would become his trademark, the screwball, and it led to him becoming a star pitcher for the Mets. A few years later, Frank was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. Frank was known for his quick wit and enthusiasm. That charming sense of humor made him a favorite of baseball fans. One pitch made him a legend, at least in Philadelphia. It was 1980, and Frank was pitching in the World Series against the Kansas City Royals. He was always nervous coming into a game. It made him weak in the knees every time he trotted onto that dusty mound. After each close call, he patted his heart with relief. And after each third out, he ran off the mound slapping his glove against his thigh as a gesture of a mini victory. But this day was different. His long sandy hair peeking out from under his Phillies cap, the high-spirited left-hander had pure adrenaline coursing through his veins. It was the ninth inning, and Frank had given up a walk and 2 hits to load the bases. The Kansas City batter had 2 strikes against him. With the score at 4-1 Phillies, one pitch stood between the Phillies' first World Series victory or a humiliating defeat. Frank mustered his famous gusto for the windup. Then the pitch. The fastball whipped through the air. Willie Wilson swung and, with a great gust of air, missed. In the 9th inning, with the bases loaded, Frank struck out the Royals batter, paving the way for the Phillies to win the World Series. Hands high in the air, he sprang from the pitcher's mound with the exuberance of victory. A few seconds later, the third baseman ran and literally jumped into his arms, creating 2 of the most iconic photos in sports history and promoting Frank to the status of legend. Meanwhile, young Timmy Smith was living in Louisiana with his parents, Betty and Horace. Timmy played Little League and, like many youngsters, had dreams of growing up to be a professional baseball player. Timmy loved baseball, and he collected the cards of all his heroes. He taped them on the wall in his bedroom. Among them was Frank, the star pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. Sadly, Timmy's parents divorced when he was 9 years old. As a result, he and his mother moved to a number of different homes over the next few years. After one such move, 11-year-old Timmy was unpacking a box when he discovered his birth certificate. He noticed his father's occupation showed baseball player, but his father, Horace, was a truck driver. Curious, he also realized his father's name that was scratched out on the certificate. He could read the last name, though, and it wasn't Smith. It was the same name as one of the baseball cards taped on his wall. Puzzled, Timmy asked his mother, who confessed about her teenage relationship with Frank back when he was playing with the Mets minor league team. Their brief romance had ended, and Betty moved away to Monroe, Louisiana. She'd married Horace Smith when Timmy was just 7 months old, so Timmy never realized that Horace wasn't his father. That was all he ever knew. It was the shock of a lifetime to learn that his biological father was one of his baseball heroes. After Timmy understood the truth, his mother made a phone call to help initiate a relationship with his real father. She took the 11-year-old to meet his dad for a brief lunch, but the reception wasn't what Timmy had hoped and expected. By this time in 1978, Frank had a family. He'd long since married and had 2 other sons. Frank may not have even known that the relationship in 1966 had resulted in the birth of a son. Whatever the case, he didn't take the news well and denied being the father of the disappointed 11-year-old boy. Timmy went on to play on his high school baseball team and was awarded a baseball scholarship at Northeast Louisiana University. His aspirations of becoming a professional baseball player all seemed to be coming together until a knee injury forever put an end to that possibility. As a senior in high school, Tim once again made contact with his father. This time, Frank acknowledged and finally accepted his role as a father. Now, he actually wanted to have a relationship with Tim, even offering to pay for his college education. Not long after, Tim changed his last name to match that of his famous father. Tim and his mother moved again to Florida, and he enrolled in a community college. In the meantime, Tim had found another passion: music. He bought a guitar at a pawn shop and learned to play. Realizing that he wasn't getting much out of his college education, Tim dropped out and headed to Nashville in 1989 to pursue a career in music. Although initially opposed to the idea, Frank eventually supported his son's ambition. Frank introduced Tim to some of his contacts at Curb Records. In just over a year, Tim signed a recording contract, but his debut album didn't do so well. Undeterred, Tim made a second album, and this one was a huge success. His album sold over 6 million copies and topped the Billboard charts, winning him Album of the Year and the top New Male Vocalist award. Tim's third album was also a success. That one sold 2 million copies and brought him his first Grammy. In 1996, Tim met a lovely lead singer who was his opening act on tour. By the end of the tour, they were in love. Staying true to his southern roots, Tim asked her to marry him in his dressing room trailer while they were doing a show up in Montana. She said, "I can't believe you're asking me to marry you in a trailer." Tim's legendary response? "Well, we're country singers. What'd you expect?" They've since been blessed with 3 daughters of their own. The couple collaborated to release an album entitled The Rest of Our Life, again topping the charts, an instant sensation. Tim McGraw and his wife Faith Hill have been one of the most popular couples in country music history. Tim's success has continued to grow over the years. He's become one of the best-known country musicians of all time. The title track on Tim's 8th album in 2004 was dedicated to his father, who had died of a brain tumor earlier that year. Live Like You Were Dying, a song in honor of Tim's father, Frank. The world remembers him as Tug McGraw. Tim remembers him as Dad. And that's his story. How's that for a story? Maybe you've heard it. Maybe you've never heard it told like that. Now you can share it with your friends and family. Can't wait to hear more? All you have to do is add it to your favorites and you'll never miss an episode. I'm Rodney Powell and you're listening to the Everyone Has a Story podcast, a production of realmedia.us. I'll be back with more stories of real people because everyone has a story.